The NCAA Cross Country season is officially in full swing, because once you get past meets like the Notre Dame Invitational, or even the Paul Short Invitational, by that point on the calendar, you should have showed us something if you have any plans of winning a national title. And believe it or not, I used to be a head coach for cross country in the NCAA. What I love about it is the fact it's the closest thing we have to a true team sport in the running community. Simply put, it really doesn't matter how fast you can run anymore if you can't convince enough of your teammates to get out in the front of the race with you. And if I'm gonna be 100% honest with you, ESPN and all their friends in the media basically act like cross country doesn't exist at all in the NCAA. You don't have to take my word for it. If you really want to know what's happening out there at the D1 level, good luck piecing it all together. You won't see it mentioned on the bottom ticker, you definitely won't see it on any of their apps. In fact, it's really hard to get them to even mention the sport by name. But if you run at the college level, I know that you deserve to have your sport covered too, by somebody who actually knows what's going on out there. And since nobody else seems to be planning on doing it, I guess you're stuck with me. Most people don't even know that two of the biggest dynasties in all of college sports for this generation run cross country on both the men's and the women's sides. But spoiler alert, I'm not expecting either of those teams to be winning a trophy this year. So here are my way too early mid-season national picks for NCAA D1 in cross country. A legitimate breakdown of how I see all of this playing out there on the trails. That way, if I get it right, I can tell you that I told you so. And if I get it wrong, I'm just gonna tell you that I'm human. I'm going to tell you the exact same thing I used to tell my college teams. National championship meets are not won during November. They're actually won during the summer, normally about 70 miles at a time per week. Starting this off on the women's side, as of October 7th, the national polls were dropped with the 5 teams that they believe are the best in the nation. So I'm gonna go through each of them, and then fill you in on what I believe they missed. The Lady Wolfpack of NC State were given the number 5 spot. Of course they are the reigning national champions, however, I'm not exactly sure what races this year they've been watching. From what I can tell, they lost to Alabama and barely beat Clemson, and the second of which isn't even listed on the national poll at all. Maybe the ranking committee knows something that I don't, but I do know that Caitlin Dewey is not suiting up anytime soon for this team. So they're looking very beatable according to me. Yet Notre Dame gets the number 4 spot, and that ranking actually does make sense, because they were very close on the clock. I'm talking average time across the course, with 2 teams who definitely belong in the top 5. So regardless of what the rankings say, I'm pretty sure that they're convinced they have the talent to win a national title, and I am inclined to believe them. The number 3 spot goes to Washington, whom I guess is the 3rd best team. They barely beat Utah and Georgetown at Nuttycombe, so maybe they're legit, but it's hard to tell. And what I'll tell you about the top 2 teams is that at this moment, they're looking practically interchangeable. BYU and NAU, and I'll explain why. They both faced off at Notre Dame at the Joe Pian Invitational, and NAU got the victory. So that's why they got the number 1 spot. That race went down to the wire, but BYU had the fastest athlete on the court, in Lexi Holiday Lowry. Theoretically speaking, she could win the NCAAs outright, because we don't have a clear favorite, but the rest of her team is going to have to go with her. But you can't count out NAU, because they've never won a national title, and barely missed out on winning it last year. So I'm sure that they believe this year is theirs. But if you're new here, I want to say thank you for even making it this far into the video. And I'm Coach Rob, the founder of SCArecruiting.com, where I rank the best track and field recruits across the entire nation. And if anything that I say actually connects with you, it is always greatly appreciated if you would please like and subscribe. But if I don't, just let me know in the comment section, because I try to read them all. I could tell you about all the other Power Conference teams who are mixing it up in the national polls, but I'm not going to do it because there's really no point. All of those teams are going to beat up on each other. I just don't expect them to finish in the top 2, regardless of how the race turns out. But I will give you my 2 sleeper picks because I'm always rooting for the underdog. These are teams that I don't think are competing for a national title, but they could sneak in there and get very close to the top 10 when it's all done. The ladies of Furman University from the Southern Conference could have been as high as 4th at the Nuttycombe Invitational. They did end up losing by the points to teams like Providence and Wisconsin, but clearly had the speed on the clock to keep up with just about anybody else in the nation. I don't know what's going to happen, but I can tell you this much. We might as well give them the championship for the Southern Conference right now, because ain't nobody out there running with them. And last year, Lipscomb University shocked the world out of the A-Sun. They almost cracked the top 10 at the NCAA meet, so you can't really call them an underdog anymore. And they only got 15th at Nuttycombe, but likely could have finished as high as 11th. But if you realistically consider where they were at this point last season, and the fact that they're likely only going to get faster from this point on, there's no reason to believe that they won't be on the starting line at the NCAAs. And once they do, they're probably going to run down a whole bunch of power conference teams after the gun goes off. But when it comes to the men's side, the race for the national title appears to be very clear-cut about now. Two teams are head and shoulders above everybody else, unless something drastically changes. And I can't call this a cross-country breakdown without addressing the men from NAU. They've gone top 2 at the NCAAs for more years than I can count right now. But this year is not going to be one of those years. Yes, their team is still pretty good. They're just not top 2 good. And Notre Dame just barely edged them out at a home meet, which is likely why they got the number 5 spot on the rankings. I admit they look pretty good, but I also don't know if it's going to matter that much. Because remember, the top 2 teams that I'm going to give you are way better than everybody else. So Notre Dame is basically still running with the field. And you'll see what I mean when I point out Iowa State at the number 4 spot, because they were number 2 at Nuttycombe. But they easily could have finished as low as 4th based on their speed on the clock. Once again, they're still running with the field. And the Arkansas Razorbacks got the number 3 spot, but I don't really understand it, because the only legitimate race they'd run through October 7th was at the Chili Pepper Invitational. Of course they won the meet, but they were the only Division I team that finished inside the top 5. So explain to me how that works. Once again, the ranking committee must know something that I don't, because if we're going off the races that we actually watched, there's no possible way they should be ranked that high. And if you really know about men's cross country, you should have been able to guess the teams in the top 2 spots. BYU and Oklahoma State. They're way better than everybody else, like I said, because BYU won Nuttycombe decisively. So much so that I can pretty confidently say now that teams like Iowa State, UNC, and even Wake Forest are second tier when it comes to the national meet now. And at the Cowboy Jamboree, Oklahoma State took care of business. They ran away from everybody, including Oregon, Texas, and New Mexico. That is hard to do. Remember, they are also the defending national champions, so the only team that could likely stop them from pulling it off again are the Cougars of BYU. And when you skip past all the other power conference teams that are likely going to beat up on each other, but definitely not finish top 2, my mind goes to the underdogs, specifically Eastern Kentucky out of the A-Sun. They finished 7th at Nuttycombe ahead of many other power conference programs like Colorado, but they could have been as high as 5th, once again based on speed. So for that reason, they might go top 10 again at the NCAAs. And while they were at the meet, Princeton also showed out, finishing 9th at Nuttycombe. That is a big deal, because that means they are now the front runners in the Ivy League. But that conference is nowhere near as easy for you to win, because Harvard is still legitimate. They did lose at the Paul Short Invitational, but that was to Wingate. And in case you don't know anything about them, they're the number 1 team in Division II right now, and it really ain't all that close. Keep in mind, defending cross-country national champion Graham Blanks hasn't run a race all season, but he's still listed on the roster for Harvard. I don't know if he will run later this season, but if he does, obviously, you gotta take Harvard a whole lot more seriously. Winning a D1 national title is always incredibly hard to do, but cross-country is something different entirely, because the team title is likely not going to be decided based on the top 10 finishers. Almost always, it is going to come down to what happens further down the leaderboards. Cutting 2 seconds off of your time might be worth as much as 10 points on the scorecard. I don't know who's going to win it all this year, but I do know that whoever actually will has already paid their dues. Because when you line up for the national championship race, the only way to win is to run fast enough to pull it off. And make sure that all of your teammates come with you. In the sport of track and field, confidence is everything, because when you win, that is just the moment when everybody else finds out what you already knew to be true, that fast is a lifestyle. Get your Fast at the Lifestyle track and field gear at scarecruiting.com/shop or use the link in the description below. It's a huge support to me and this channel, so I can continue to make you more content like this. And remember, it is always greatly appreciated if you would please like and subscribe.